Hello, Internet. Hopefully you can hear me. That's the first test. And by me asking if you can hear me, that means Still Digging is back for season 2. 222. Now we get to see if my esteemed panel was able to return and be heard. Panel, can you hear me?
We can. You just went mute. On mute. Good question. We also don't have his video feed either. I wonder if Skype is not cooperating today.
That cannot be. If anything, we're a professional brand. I mean, check this out. Our great Amma has redone our overlay for season 2. We look like a professional outfit here. And, you know, we have a design. Check out our new logo. If you've been following us on social media, Amma has also redesigned our logo for this season. Oh, there is Tom. Welcome back.
I'm back. Hey!
He's back. On brand.
On brand. Technical difficulties is our brand. So, once again, we're back. So, welcome to Still Digging, the first and only live on YouTube, on the internet, panel discussion by archaeologists that we know about show where we discuss the world of archaeology, presented by the ArchaeoRPG Collective. I'm your host, Bill, and the panel today includes Amma and Tom. Serra, as Archaeo Fantasies, is currently on vacation and will hopefully join us next time. There's a slim chance she might be able to join us tonight, but probably not. So Serra, enjoy your vacation. We're thinking of you. Today, we are back to our ballywick, that's a good word, of tabletop RPGs and pop culture and just nefarious archaeology everywhere. So first up, let's talk a little bit about a little show on the internets called Critical Role and the role of nationalism and nationalist archaeology. I will hand off the floor now to Amma and Tom.
All right, Amma, do you want me to get us started, or do you have something good?
You've got the floor, so take it away, and I'll bounce off you.
Sounds good. Okay, so you may have heard of Critical Role. It's a international phenomenon. What? It's a live play D&D show on previously Geek and Sundry, now on their own YouTube channel, and also potentially on Amazon Prime with the animated series, because
first and foremost, they're on their own Twitch channel, which also rebroadcast on YouTube.
That too.
And there is a animated series coming to Amazon Prime soon, which I am I was part of the Kickstarter for. But you guys continue.
All right.
And they desperately need our support too.
They desperately need our support.
Yes. So
you would never have heard about them without us.
Right. So you nerds who know about this stuff and I know nothing about it, continue.
The current campaign, there are two national factions, the Empire and the Dynasty, and there are artifacts which they are in conflict over particular artifacts, and a theme that has popped up not so much recently, but a few episodes ago, was archaeology to find these particular artifacts of power, which is reminiscent of actually real-world nationalist archaeology. So archaeology and history, as we all know, well, as we, us, them, these, all know, is political. History and archaeology are a political field There's nothing that you can do that can separate it from the political aspect of it. And historically, the first one that actually comes to mind is Nazi archaeologists during World War II. There was a specific branch of the SS that was tasked with finding artifacts related to the Aryan race. Many of them were imaginary. Some of them may have been real. The one that I know that so this was a branch run by Heinrich Himmler that there was a lot of they were looking at for a lot of biblical archaeology stuff, so things related to like the spear of destiny, which is supposed to be the spear that killed Jesus as he was being crucified, and the Ark of the Covenant, and which if you watch Indiana Jones, there's a lot of that. The guys that he's fighting are the and does anybody know how to pronounce that?
What word?
Nazi?
And then, well, not Nazi. I know how that one.
Actually,
and
fighting against the Nazis.
Well, yeah, but the Ahnenerbe, no, okay.
What?
They're Nazi archaeologists. That's all you need to know.
Oh, the Ahnenerbe. I mean,
all right.
There are going to be tens of people shaking their fist at their computer screens. Okay, there's going to be single digits of people, single people shaking their fist at the screen at us right now on how dare you.
Sure.
We're sorry.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. I don't speak any German. I don't know. I'm looking at the pronunciation guide on Wikipedia, and I don't know how to read it. Anyway, but this is a type of archaeology that is used specifically to further nationalistic ideas for a particular country, and in Critical Role, this is actually a thing that got pulled up together. So they're looking specifically for these specific artifacts of power in an archaeological site. The Mighty Nine, the crew in the campaign crew had an opportunity to go there. They have not yet gone there, and I am just disappointed. I want them to go so bad. I want them to go hang out with a bunch of nerdy archaeologists. Maybe they could bring some, RPG players who are archaeologists on the show. That'd be weird, right?
Right. I mean, Alma, do you think there's going to be a way for, simple mere mortals, not Mercers, to be able to do those things? There's only something we could use as a guide to help us.
That is an excellent point. I have already speculated. I put it out there in the Twitter ether that I asked Matt Mercer regarding that question. I have not received a response yet. But I think the problem is because the group hasn't necessarily gotten there yet or shown any direct interest in it. I get the sense that it may not necessarily be included in any great detail in the book because specifically it's very plot related within the Critical Role universe. At least this is all speculative, right. But it's been, it's like a little bait that I think Mercer's put out there and the team hasn't taken up yet. And I get a sense that I think it would be more up to people who have an interest in said area to maybe explore and expand upon it either before or even after the campaign does. And
Mr. Mercer, we know you're watching, and we appreciate you as a fan. If you need additional archaeological consultation, we would humbly, if we can find time in our schedules, be able to try to assist you, if possible, with that. But this is all circling around that there's a guidebook coming out for an official Dungeons and Dragons guidebook coming out that is set in the game world of that Critical Role Season 2 is taking place in, Wildemount, where that's what we're all speculating on. It's coming out, is it this week or next week?
I believe it's going to be this upcoming week, if I'm not mistaken.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
All right, can we talk about just for like a minute the way archaeology and archaeologists are portrayed in D&D currently? Has anybody seen? I think we've taken a look at it, but there's like a rogue archetype archaeologist.
Well,
Is that,
that's a homebrew thing. The official D&D
Yeah.
one is what's in the backgrounds in the back of Tomb of Annihilation, which is the Rituals and Roll campaign we're playing in now, which I promise is coming back soon. We've just taken a little hiatus on that, but in that one they have a background for both an archaeologist and an anthropologist. And it's a mix of Indiana Jones, Lara Croft, and Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series. And the anthropologist is basically every crazy thing you've ever thought about Franz Boas. And Margaret Mead.
And I was gonna go with the over enthusiastic undergrad. It's the mask. Like, so one of the quirks that you can get, one of the character flaws you can get is that you have some sort of tribal mask that you wear at all times. Like you got it. You were doing ethnographic studies someplace, got a mask, and then you just never took it off. So maybe it's a cursed item. Maybe you're just a colonist. I don't know.
Would you say? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you think about archaeologists in video games and like what class you would assign them, given how they're stereotyped, I would say they fit the rogue archetype the best in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe the way they're portrayed in popular culture, I would have to say yes. I think we're much closer to a ranger though, honestly. Like CRM archaeologists, we're out in the field all the time. We have to know how to use a map. You have to know how to read a landscape. I think that fits much closer to say a ranger or something.
Well, that's wishful thinking. You're thinking like your actual work. I'm just saying like,
this is what
portrayal
you think this is what you think you're doing.
No, that is what I'm doing. This is what people think I'm doing. I do woodcraft stuff. Like I find deer trails and I don't move through the woods.
I can't shoot a bow worth anything. I do know how to swing a machete, so I guess that could be sort of the dual wielding knife. The dual wielder ranger. Sort of the small blade.
I think there are builds where you can use a spear or whatever. That's like a shovel.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is good discussion though too, because if we, eventually go on to build a game, how much do you balance those two classes out? Because there's expectations of gamers and what they've seen in media, and then there's also what archaeologists know of their position. Do you completely scrap the rogue archetype, or do you kind of create a blend of the two?
I think we would have to add, like, I would even go as far as barbarian based on some of the people I know. Which my character in our campaign may or may not be based off of.
Now, here's the other thing. I have to counter that because, again, not all archaeologists are necessarily field archaeologists, so how do you account for the more scholarly type?
So I guess we're going to have to work some wizard in there. Not all archaeologists. We're going to have to work a wizard. I think is it going to be a subclass, or is it going to how do we work it into being, because it can't be a subclass because then we have to pick a class for it to be a subclass of, right? So, but depending on who, like what subfield you work in, and your what kind of, like, are you a field person, are you a lab person, are you an academic, or are you an agency, or are you CRM? That's all going to depend on, like, that will all have influence on what kind of class or build you would be doing, right? So if we're having scholarly folk, we're going to have a wizard in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make a wizard archaeologist?
Could it be something that's adapted to each one of the classes per se? That's like a build off of it, but just ties to a specific kind of, area or sub-discipline of archaeology?
I mean, I like that idea. But then do we make it would have to be like its own book almost.
Yeah.
And would is Dungeons and Dragons the right model for something like this? There are other gaming systems out there, other open source systems.
That's true.
Maybe we have to jump into something else.
Well, our aim is to make this accessible, right? And I think the most widely played one is D&D. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you have any suggestions, please put them down in the comments section or tweet them at us at ArchaeoRPG. You got to get those.
Or even in the comments.
Yeah.
That's why I said the comments down below. Because when they're watching,
the chat.
When they're watching, no, we took that away. Our new overlay is different. So when you're watching YouTube comments, on mobile they're down, and I guess if you're looking at it on a desktop, it's to the side. Go to Twitter.
Just post everywhere, every direction.
And don't forget to smash that like button. Smash.
Subscribe. Turn on. What's the notification? I don't know.
What are all the cliches? All right. So we've drifted off a little bit, and maybe before is there any other goofy stuff we want to talk about? Before we move to the next topic, I think we want to go back to some of the more serious nationalistic
there was
examples.
Well, I almost think that's a bit hyperbolic, because I think when we're being critical of nationalist archaeology, I think it's just as important to kind of touch upon more of the subtleties as well too. Nationalist archaeology isn't just, necessarily Nazi archaeology or wartime archaeology. It's going on now, and archaeology is constantly, fitted within agendas. I mean, look at, Bears Ears as an example.
Yeah, you could argue that archaeology in the United States, North American archaeology, is nationalistic archaeology, in that we even have this divide between historic archaeology and pre-contact archaeology. Those are artificial barriers which are created, which are meant to tell a certain story, and so they are frames to tell a story. And when you frame something, you're framing it. Dribbled out.
The fact that we're trying to separate pre-contact archaeology from basically the continuum of what we refer to as historical archaeology is a colonial construct. It is a white supremacist construct. And this comes down to how the way in which indigenous tribes are able to gain federal recognition. So specifically, I mean, in Virginia, it's been only in the last couple of years have we gotten federally recognized tribes, which means all the federal regulations that were previously they would not get triggered by any project. So there's the Native American Graves, NAGPRA, and Native American Graves Repatriation and Protection Act did not get triggered at all for any reason within Section 1 or within Virginia, because we had no Virginia recognized tribes. There were several around surrounding Virginia, which were brought in as consulting parties, and I'm getting too much in the weeds with Section 106 process.
What is?
Yeah, that's a bunch of federal regulations, and I'm gonna cut that off right there. The point is, we now have tribes in Virginia which have been deemed sovereign by the federal government. And this is a new thing, despite the fact that we know that there have been people here since before we got here, because Jamestown, there were people interacting before Jamestown, during Jamestown, that we decided that they were not legitimate partially because of eugenics and white supremacy and a whole bunch of other things. But that's a different conversation. But now they have been recognized, and there are sites that when archaeologists find them during the cultural resource management process, we are adding to their legitimacy sometimes, or sometimes what we find is misinterpreted or reinterpreted in another way to try to delegitimize tribes, which is, in my personal opinion, a bunch of crap. But there are current controversial sites that are on the Jamestown map that are like the fact that we have this particular site from John Smith from the 1612 map that he made, and it's being contested by companies that as a legitimate site or as a significant site. I might be getting some of the details with you there. Just a reminder. None of my statements on here or anywhere else are necessarily the views or opinions of a company that I work for. But the fact is that these sites, which are important sites to federally recognized indigenous groups, are being contested by non-indigenous groups as legitimate or non-legitimate.
Now, can I kind of bounce off that and take us back to Critical Role?
Yes, please.
No, I think it's a good point. What you're talking about, and one of the major themes of what you're talking about, is the idea of legitimacy and recognition of power. Yes. And within Critical Role, you see that as well, because you have two competing empires. You have the Dwendalians and you have the Kryn. And what it really revolves around between one of their major conflicts is this artifact, the Luxon Beacon, which is a ritual object within the Kryn dynasty. It's something that's of really important, significant ritual and spiritual significance. But it's something that the Dwendalian Empire has come across, within their quote unquote empire. And to that end, it becomes a question of is this object used between these two cultures? Which takes, which importance will win out? Who has the power? Who has the control over this artifact? And who ultimately can claim ownership over it? And what in denying ownership to a group that claims its, significance to it over time, how is that contested, and where will that go? And I think it'll end up playing a really important part of Critical Role throughout the remaining campaign.
Yeah, especially in the I don't know. We're trying to avoid spoilers. There are certain events coming up that will probably be a big deal about. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think there's something there that Matt Mercer has really kind of hit upon in a way that makes it extremely accessible, especially in this particular campaign. That is fantastic for us, because it is a theme that we can just like latch onto and just squeeze the juice out of, because it is so good, and it is so engaging, and we need that, and these allegorical storylines are just awesome.
To that end, if I can add on, one thing that I found was really interesting, I don't remember this within game. I don't know if you guys remember this, but supposedly the excavations are being conducted jointly by the Cerebus Assembly and the Cobalt Soul, which are not necessarily opposing factions, but they don't necessarily have each other's best interests at heart. They're very much checks and balance kind of organizations, which I think is really interesting.
So for me, the Cerberus Assembly is the equivalent to the Ahnenerbe, because they're also aside from the whole like Zemnians have a German accent and all this other stuff. But aside from that, they're a multifaceted organization that is supposed to be kind of this research group within the Empire, which they're in this case their badness is slightly more ambiguous. It's implied. It's implied that it's ambiguous, but it is or no? Is it implied ambiguous or implied that it is bad?
I think they're slightly implied evil, but at least through like Caleb backstory.
Yeah. I don't like them. That's the point. I think they're the bad guys. And Bo is Indiana Jones. That seems wrong. But the point I'm trying to get is I think they are. I like how paralleled it is with reality in terms of nationalist archaeology. I think it is. Mm-hmm. It is interesting, and I think that because it is so engaging, it would be easy to transition between that and reality if people actually like pick up a history book and look at how archaeology has been used in the past and even in the present, as I kind of pointed out. But yeah, I mean there are other more sensitive examples of this that I don't want to make any judgments on. But there are situations in which nations are using archaeology to legitimize their occupation of land, and that's as specific as I want.
Let's just keep an eye on Critical Role from here on out and see how things develop. Huh?
Now, I think if we keep an eye on here, I think you can tell we definitely have the enthusiasm for it. We're most likely going to be getting that book. We'll be reading it over. And keep an eye on the channel through all of our communications. And I have a feeling that we're going to come back to this, not only as a topic on this show here, but hopefully at least as a one-shot or even its own campaign. So keep an eye out in the future. We're definitely going to be coming back to this. But now let's transition over to a different kind of online content.
I don't want to.
Not nearly as fun.
Far more upsetting.
Why did you make us watch this video?
It made me sad.
I was never anticipating to find this kind of video on. I follow this gentleman. So Jake is I didn't actually know it's Dal MYD. I actually don't know how to pronounce it, but Jake is actually an underwater explorer. He tapes a lot of his videos in high res, beautiful shots, focuses on finding things that people have thrown away in rivers and oceans, or they've lost them. Sometimes we'll return them if the owner is found. And I found that really engaging. Like there's a human story element to it. And I was really excited by it. Sometimes he would go out and look for megalodon teeth with friends. And then just about 2 weeks ago?
Sure.
Lost you, in case you can hear us. Be back in a second. Yeah, it's just the bouncing back to Japan.
Am I back?
You are back.
There you go.
Excellent. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No, and so
one of the newer
videos.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Perfect. So Jake posted a video, found rare arrowhead while digging for artifacts on a private site. And I seeing some of the other videos, I had hoped he would approach it with kind of the sensitivity that the topic entails, but it's very clear that this is a private venture run by somebody who possibly does this as like a side business, because it's pretty horrific. And the funniest thing is the video starts out initially with his friend, his truck's broken into, his stuff is stolen, it's strewn all over the place, and it's all about this sense of feeling like they were, just robbed of really important things and valuables that meant something to them and treated just like absolute trash. And then they go and get shovels. And they go out to what is very obviously,
right? That's how good storytelling is. You do a little foreshadowing at the beginning, so you can get the gist of how the whole story is going to go.
Can we talk about these shovels for just like a half a second?
We're not there yet.
Fine. I'll hold on to it. I'm gonna keep
go
going.
there. That's actually the next part of the video. Is that he starts out by saying we got these shovels and we took them to Home Depot and
it looked like we were breaking in.
We were stealing their electricity.
And they shave the tips off of the shovels in order to create better wall scrapers, in essence.
They sell.
There's so many. All right, hold on. Yeah, they sell them flat. They sell them flat. They sell flat shovels. One. They sell specific ones called sharpshooters, which are specifically for making walls like this. I just can't. Why would you cut a perfectly good spade in half? There's just no reason for it.
So,
well, the most likely reason is they probably picked the $6 shovels instead of like anything more expensive, and they probably only found.
But they make $6 flat shovels too.
I know. We've all been there, but
I bought them and broken them.
I mean, they're only going to last you a day, so
maybe.
And I honestly think that was really telling from the start of the video. Like, once you're doing that and it's clear that they don't know what the proper tools for this are, you kind of get a sense of where this video is going. It's even more foreshadowing, I guess, in a way. And it's interesting the way they frame their quote unquote dig is very much like what they know what they're doing is they don't want to shoot what's around them. It's very much centralized on them. When he's out swimming, he'll feature the location and he'll talk about it and he'll encourage people to do it, which he does in this video. But it's very much, it has this air of what they're doing. Like, it is very much taboo and they know it, but I don't know. What did you guys think?
I wasn't paying as much attention to that part, actually.
Because I don't think do they ever say in the video that they're on private land with permission, or is it only implied in the title? Because I don't remember them ever saying. I think it's
only implied in the title.
I don't remember anyone saying that. Because I know in some of those digging shows on, like you see on cable, they make sure they show the scene of knocking on the door. Hey, buddy, we're going to dig in your backyard with a backhoe for the next 3 days and tear it up completely. But we're going to take whatever we do down to the thing, sell it, and give you half of it. Okay. But, there's an implied contract with the homeowner there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't ever get a sense of where they are.
Right. We know they're in Florida.
All we know is that they're just in Florida someplace. I can tell you from the stratigraphy that they're probably in a floodplain someplace or near a floodplain someplace because they're deep sandy deposits.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be any number of places.
That's Florida.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's just Florida. I'm sorry, I'm used to that only showing up around rivers where I work. But you can see that it's a stratified site. It doesn't look like it's been extensively plowed or otherwise disturbed, which means the stuff that they're digging up would have a lot of useful information for us if we dug it up correctly. Mm-hmm. That hurts to see.
I think, yeah. Keep on.
And then the points that they're finding they're Middle Archaic, so they're like 5,000 or 6,000 years old. The things that they're digging up, and where they're finding them, and the types of that they're finding, and that. I think they also don't understand why the things that they're finding are broken for the most part, mm-hmm. which is you have stuff, it breaks, you throw it away. If you have good stuff, you don't you hold on to it. You take it someplace where you're going to use it, and generally speaking, you use it until it breaks. So that's why most of the stuff they found was busted.
Or they're the sites where things are intentionally broken, and in more context would have been like your short-term ceremonial sites. You'll see the intentionally broken ones there. But these will be a little more finished, so that wouldn't have been something like that. But yeah, you're right. They're down low enough where it could be questionable whether or not they were in situ, meaning that whether they were in the exact spot that they would have been deposited at 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, as opposed to something that would have been churning around in sort of a time-wise out of its context. The other thing too is they kept talking about these things. Even Make was upset.
Sorry about that.
No,
my neighbor dropped something.
He has every right to be upset, and we all should be upset. But they kept
we all should be upset.
They kept talking about these things called heartbreakers, because these were the broken pieces. They are just as valuable, if not more valuable. Like, you don't need an intact piece to tell a story. A partial piece. I mean, we live in the world of part. I mean, archaeology is done by partial pieces. The partial pieces can tell you as much, if not more, than the intact pieces. Intact pieces make good cover art, and your museum wants to take them from you. But research-wise, they're just another point. Yeah. I know that's not always how people take it in our field, and there are definitely archaeologists who disagree with me on that aspect, but it's a data point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all right, we can all agree that we all like stuff, right? Like nice. we like finding stuff, right? And we like finding intact stuff, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't happen that often.
Right. They're rare. It's cool. It's cool when you find intact stuff, but that's not the value. The stuff is not what we value in a dig, and I think that's an important point to make.
Absolutely. I think that was the one thing that I wanted to latch on to as well too, is this idea of valuation. Like when you hear Jake talk about what he's looking to find, he's like, I want to find the oldest thing. I want to find the most intact thing. I want to find, what is most valuable, which again contrasts so wildly with his other videos where he's out in lakes finding people's iPhones and their wedding rings and talks about how important they are to these people. Again, these are things that were just dropped or lost or forgotten. But they're modern, and he's finding these things, and they have stories that we can tangibly tell in a very real time way. Whereas, I find it so odd that he comes to this site and he looks at these objects, that are in essence, they could possibly be, dropped, and they have stories to them. We just can't necessarily reach out and contact the person who dropped them. Right. But that doesn't mean that they have any less value than, the wedding bands that he finds in the rivers and the lakes. And I find that a huge disconnect in this narrative that he's written for this.
I don't think he's unique. I think this is
absolutely not
a very common thing among modern people. With that, we, in the United States, and I know this takes place around the world. There is a disconnect between what is now versus what is in the past, and even more so to those people in the past who we either don't have a direct lineage attachment to, a familiar attachment to in some way. When our story has been broken, like I mentioned earlier, with the whole historic is on this side, pre-contact's on that side, there's two different stories. So when you put the disconnect that way, what is pre-contact? All of a sudden, you've put a barrier between me and pre-contact. That means nothing to me. You've told me everything that I should care about is either before this date or in this other land over here. So that all that happens with the older things are maybe some interesting stories and some cool stuff. Where instead, these were people, these were civilizations, these were familiar networks, these were complicated trade networks, these were craftspeople, these were hunters, these were people who, made a mark on their worlds, and they are just as valid and important as the person who dropped a cell phone. I think that it's awesome that this guy takes that much care with the cell phone story, and I just wish, like Amma said, that he took as much care with the story of these Middle Archaic peoples as he did with the cell phone.
And that's the thing too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the best illustration of this disconnect I can actually, like, from my personal experience that I have, is that So when we work, and when I work in my area, so I work in the DC metro area. I work in Maryland, DC, Virginia, mostly Northern Virginia, and we find points that are named after tribes in the area. So the Piscataway Point, there's a Piscataway tribe in Maryland. They are they're a state recognized tribe in Maryland. I don't think they're federally recognized, are they yet? Still, do you know?
Part of them are. They are multiple Piscataways, and I believe there is one that is. And I know I'm going to get yelled at them, but this one, because I should know that one.
Yeah. But like the Piscataway, the Pamunkey are the descendants of the people who John Smith first interacted with. So the like Powhatan and his tribe, the Mattaponi, the Monacans. These are all. Huh?
I'm just saying this is a lot of information for me.
Yeah, these are groups that exist. They are the Pamunkey, the Upper Mattaponi, the Mattaponi. I think I messed that one up. Sorry. The Monacans. These are all, and there are others. They are easy to find. Go look them up. These are all federally recognized tribes that currently have. They're still kind of in the process of setting up their. They all have tribal governments, but they're like setting up their situation with the federal government, so that they have that liaison there. But these are people. These are people who are alive. Mm-hmm. These cultures have not gone away, and so I get that we are well. We're trying to sort things out now with all the stuff going on, but we are in the middle of I do work with archaeology and community. We do a young archaeologist club in the spring, and every time we do a session, we start talking about pre-contact artifacts. And when I tell the kids that these people are still around, we can go talk to them and ask them, how did you use this? How did your ancestors use this? Like this past weekend, we were talking about organic artifacts, and I taught them how to make baskets. I was showing them examples of like Mattaponi baskets and Ojibwe fishing traps, and like their minds are blown that these people are still around. Like they don't like, we are not teaching this concept that like these are not dead people. These are not gone. These civilizations or these cultures are not disappeared. They're still here. They're still around. They still are walking around and talking and living and breathing and living in the same areas as we are. They're here. They're people. They're just people like us. We should not be discounting them from history.
But that relates back to what we were talking about earlier, which is just again the concept of legitimacy. At the end of the day, you're using your platforms to talk about giving people their own power, their own stories, and recognizing that. And this guy who did the video has like a 9 million subscriber platform, and he's weaving two completely different narratives between items that, are essentially just as meaningful to the people who once owned them. And that's something that I think anybody can see as long as we're willing to point that out. And I think that's why our platform is important, is that we can look at, these popular platforms and say, look at how these stories are being told differently, and people can become a little bit more critical of how they're consuming this media.
Yeah, and I just want to go back because I want to get these names right for the tribes recognized in Virginia. So it's the Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Upper Mattaponi, Rappahannock, Nansemond, Monacan, and Pamunkey were first, and then in 2018, the other 6 got recognition.
Well, you can put that information below, right?
Yeah, I can do that. But I just wanted to make sure that I got
the show notes after adjustment. And for those throughout North America, this is easy enough to look in your province for your First Nation tribes, and for our European and Asian friends. There are going to be indigenous peoples of your areas, and just look into that. and in a lot of places they haven't gone anywhere. They're still there throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I want to make sure that it's important to remember also that even 5,000-6,000 years ago, it may not be the culture may not look exactly the same, but these are still the descendants of those people. They're not a brand new people.
Right, just like
Yes.
the sort of the classic question I was taught in undergrad, of like, you know, the standard tourist question when someone goes down to Chichen Itza. It's like, what happened to the mystery of the Mayans? The Mayans disappeared.
They're still here.
The Mayans didn't go anywhere. The Mayans are the people selling you the souvenirs over there at the stand. If you want to know where the Mayans are, just go over there.
You see that guy? He's mine.
So that's important for many places in the world.
Topic that definitely needs an episode.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one. But speaking of topics,
because they're making TV shows about that. But whatever.
But
that's another one. We'll get to it.
We can't talk about that though without Serra here, though. She wouldn't let us talk about that without Serra here.
Yeah.
So. But
next time,
maybe next time, maybe not. We'll see what's going on in the world. So now for our final topic today. This one's sort of a little more timely in aspects. This is the time of the fall and the late early spring are the conference times of the year for archaeology. There are many conferences going on during that time period. So we were originally planning on a full-throated discussion of the conference season coming up ahead. It's been interrupted a little bit, but we'll get to that as we go through that. But it's still important, the conference season and some debates within the conference structures.
So this is actually a thing that we're gonna kind of stay away from why the conferences right now are being canceled. That's stressful. I don't want to deal with it right now.
Yeah,
but
no.
The thing that I want to put up is that in the last couple of years, I've had so many conversations with people about the format of our conferences. So I go specifically to the Society of Historical Archaeology, and I do a regional conference for the Mid-Atlantic Archaeology, the format for those is almost they're symposium sessions. So which means that there is a theme, you get 6 or 8 or 10 or however many papers, and everybody comes up and they gives a presentation, and then you go home. And that's it. That's the whole thing. There's often not enough time for discussion. If they're not interactive presentations, they're just, here's my paper. And often they're people just reading a script. There's no dialectic, there's no interaction. It's just, I went to this place and I dug up these things and I found this and that means these things, and here's some theory and stuff and pretty pictures. And the pretty pictures are good, but those sessions are super boring. I hate sitting through them. I want to get that information. If it's a particularly interesting topic to me, I'll sit through it and I'll enjoy it because it's something that's interesting to me. But I'd much rather just have a conversation with somebody about this, and that's actually part of the reason. So I've been helping archaeology community set up panels where we're talking about community archaeology or similar topics. But it's a panel, it's a discussion, it's people talking to each other, it's people talking with the audience, and it's a much more satisfying and engaging setup for me. But one of the questions that has been brought up also recently is, how do we make these more accessible to the public? And the question I have is, should we be?
Oh, you're just going to leave it there, huh?
Do you have any comments on that? Should we be making these more accessible to the public? Should we be having public conferences? How do we make this useful? More useful.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Thank you for
Yes,
coming to
what?
the TED Talk. So,
Yes, what?
yes, no, these should be good to go back to sort of your earlier thing. Um, the difference between panels and papers, they both have a place. For me,
Sure.
there's always two different kinds of papers. There's the what I did this summer paper, and then there's the research paper. Those are the two subject matters. But there's more importantly, there's the student who's trying to learn how to engage in public speaking and engage in presenting
Sure.
research. And these aren't meant for your entertainment. This is like, no, I'm serious. This is meant for them to be in a safe place with minimal criticism, so they don't get pushed out of the field right away because they gave a bad presentation. It should be a place where they can feel comfortable making out there, because it's maybe the first time they're ever talking to a crowd of people for that. So I think giving papers at that level is always important, but panels can be very rich and important. But sometimes though panels can be like very cool and rich for the people on the panels, it still can be just as boring for the people in the audience. Yeah, people in the panels are having nice little chatting and they're having a nice little conversation with each other, but they're not actually talking to the audience or taking the audience into consideration. So both have bad points. But in terms of your other question about the public, absolutely, because if we're ever going to properly engage with the public and overcome things like dissociation of the past versus the present, as we discussed in our second topic, or as with the world of pseudoscience and science, as we frequently talk about on here, we need more platforms to talk to people. If we broadcast papers on the internet, will it have huge ratings? I don't know, but at least it'll be available for those people who want to watch it, which is probably more people. I guarantee, because I have at a conference canceled recently. I'm going to probably make my paper into a presentation for video, upload it. It might even be on this channel. I'm not sure yet, but probably if not there, it'll be over on Archeo Thoughts. And I am probably I'm pretty sure that more people will watch that video than would have watched me present that paper at that conference. You'd be surprised with that. I mean, I watch lectures and videos in my spare time on there. A lot of people do that. They don't get the biggest hits. Yeah, but I mean, but I'm talking.
But they're useful.
If you got 500, I mean, I'm not talking about like 9 million. We're not PewDiePie here. But if 100, for most conferences, at least most ones I've attended, if I had 200 people watch my video, that's twice as or 4 times as many that have ever watched a single paper. My people watch me present a paper between 25 and maybe 50 people. I think 50 might have been the maximum to watch me present a paper. So the numbers aren't that high to get for that.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, does every paper need to be public? No. Sort of research, and there's obviously certain protections needed. But in general, most people's papers already filter out those protections, or they should be, because you don't know who snuck into that conference room. So I think there is a role for presenting these in the public. That's my soapbox, and now I will step down for the moment.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Excellent.
Please.
So I had the pleasure of attending the TAG conference in the UK. That is the Theoretical Archaeology Group. I believe there is a US or North American chapter as well, too?
Yes.
Yes. And excellent. So I have to say, I was really overwhelmed by the diversity of the options for some of the panels and sessions. For example, I signed up for a comic book one where we spent both the time talking about some of the data that some of the panelists had collected and some of the projects they had worked on, but we also had hands-on learning where we got to experiment with narrative storytelling in a comic book format, and drawing certain items and talking about how you tell stories visually. And that was something that I would have never expected otherwise. So I think there is certainly a place for more experimental conferences, but conferences are very much in and of themselves. I'm sure there's several anthropological studies of these events, but there is very much a format to them. And, do we challenge that necessarily, or do we just, create something new? Because the thing is we talk about, do we need to make conferences open to the public, or do we just need to come up with something different for the public?
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the Public Archaeology Twitter conference organized by Warner Richardson for the past few years as a sort of a great example of just finding a different way of telling the story. And a lot of
but
things...
it's still under that guise of conference, though. So, that's where... Yeah. What was that? I like that con that Serra went to.
ArchaeoCon.
Yeah, you went there too, didn't you?
I was helping run a table for archaeology in the community.
How was that?
Who'd you cosplay as?
Me?
Yeah, come on. I know Serra.
No, I mean, like, I cosplayed them. Serra decided to identify herself as a colonist by wearing a pith helmet. But no, I came as a community archaeologist. That's cosplaying for me. I'm a CRM grunt. But no, so that was basically the public day for the AIA conference, the American Institute of Archaeology conference. And it was essentially for the public day. What they had was a table room, and this is something I have been really lucky to be able to participate with archaeology in the community. So last year, the Association for the Advancement of American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, had a conference in DC, and we were able to share a booth with it was us, SAA, Society for American Archaeology, DC SHPO, the Historic Preservation Office in DC, and the Virtual Curation Project from the Virginia Commonwealth University. It's a they did 3D scans of artifacts, and they actually have like an online collection that he's been Bernard Means runs the project. Dr. Bernard Means runs the project, and he has been collecting artifacts from all over the world, and they're on. He actually has them on what's the they're available for 3D print. So if you want to use these artifacts to teach with, you can download the file and print it, and then you have this artifact for your collection yourself, or an online 3D manipulable file, whatever.
Is it the virtual creation lab? The virtual creation lab out of ECU.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. If not, it will be in the show notes when we get there.
There's like a online library for 3D printing files or whatever, but that they have a account on that. You can do the thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. So this group, we were at this, they did a science expo, and that's basically the same thing that ArchaeoCon was. So it's just exactly what you think of when you think of a con for like Comic-Con or something like that, or AwesomeCon or AutoCon or whatever the cons, right? And but it was all just science groups and education groups and all this stuff, and we did the same thing, but just archaeology. So it was us, the SHPO was there again, Fairfield Foundation. There was a group of reenactors for Roman Legion. They had people playing the game of It's like this. It's this board game that they actually found at It's a Sumerian site, a city, Sumerian city that has been. It's a. Look it up. I'm not going to try to explain it. but it was huge. It was some of the most traffic I think I've ever gotten for a table. We sold a bunch of T-shirts. People got engaged. We had a mock dig for kids to play with, and Dr. Jones brought some of the rock hour replicas I put together for people to do drawings and rubbings of and stuff. And people seemed to be extremely responsive, and it was a blast. And then at the end of it, they did a panel, and it was Dr. Alexander Jones, the director of archaeology community, James Delgado. That might be wrong. He is one of the VPs at Search. And he does all this kind of maritime archaeology stuff, and they're actually the ones that are digging up Clotilde right now, which is the last clandestine ship to import enslaved Africans from Africa into the States after the ban on the international slave trade happened. And we're AITC, actually, archaeology community, is lucky enough we're going to be partnering with them on some of their education outreach. And then they also had Josh Gates on the panel, which I have a lot of conflicting feelings about, but he is actually on the board of the AIAs.
Who was he cosplaying as?
Himself?
Oh, I thought he was cosplaying.
He was cosplaying as an archaeologist, which is what he does at all times. So Josh Gates, what is this? It's several shows.
I don't know.
There's a lot of them, but I think
Travel Channel, though, right?
Yeah, Travel Channel, and I think maybe Discovery. But it's popular, and sometimes they do good archaeology stuff. Like the Mummies Live thing was, I think, very good for archaeology. It was real archaeology with real archaeologists, and there was people talking about it, and it was exciting, and people seemed to be engaged with it. But then, he also has
ancient alien people,
and has a show about ghost hunting and stuff. So I have some misgivings about that, but I think the point that I want to make about specifically the ArchaeoCon thing, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling at this point. The point I wanted to make was the ArchaeoCon format, I think, was very good. People were really excited about it. The fact that they had a big name like Josh Gates was a big draw for people. Even if they weren't there for us, the real archaeologists, they were there. And I think that is the big, getting people to show up, I think, is the hard part. And I think that is a good, at least starting spot for it. But we still need that professional space for conferences, I think. Because like I was rambling about federal regulations earlier, and most of the people who watch this, are probably going to be archaeologists, but most of the other people who watch this that aren't involved in cultural resource management are not going to know any of the regulations I was talking about, and they're not going to care about it. They're going to care about the fact that we're talking about Critical Role, and they're going to care about the fact that I mentioned Josh Gates, and not much of the stuff in between, to be honest. But we're hoping that they still watch it, and maybe some of it gets absorbed subconsciously. Sorry, that went on for a while.
No. I mean, that's an excellent example of a different kind of format, and I think the sort of what Anna was saying earlier was, I think we need sort of more of like kind of all of these things. Like all of them are important.
The one actually really cool format about the Science Expo that AAAS did was that, so while they had all of it was set up like a normal con, right? Like there were panels going on with the huge like floor layout and all the booths and everything. So even like, so that you have all that, like, oh, I can walk by and it's very casual and I can talk to people. And they also had this more intensive stuff going on in the background that was, it was set up in a speaker system. So like if you could kind of hear it in the background in the whole expo area. or you could actually walk up and like pay attention to what the speaker was saying. But it was still, it had both kind of realms of very casual and also much more formal kind of presentations. And I think that mix is useful, especially in that public setting thing.
Yeah. But yeah,
Dude.
we're gonna and you know, to take something from the standard conference things, we're gonna throw up the index card right now and say, "Time's up."
2 minutes. Yeah. Do we want to just do some quick plugs on stuff
Oh
going
yeah.
on?
As we wrap, let's get into the wrap up of the show now. As Tom has mentioned plenty of times, his work with Archaeology in the Community, a Washington D.C. based charity that does public education outreach. So Tom, where after all this name dropping, where is everybody? where is everybody going to find them?
Okay, so you can find everything that we do at archaeologyInCommunity.com. We are running a fundraiser for a project we run in St. Croix for local high school students. Right now, we are really pushing to get some money for that. Hopefully, hit our goal. But you can find that and all the links for it archaeologyandcommunity.com. You can go to my Twitter page. I have it pinned on mine at T Cuthbertson, the name above me, 13. Go check it out. They're a great program. We're based out of DC.
Show notes.
Yes.
Show notes as well.
Yeah.
And as I've been mentioned a few times, as you can see from Amazon portrait to our nice overlay to our new logo, Amma kind of does art on the side. So if you want to get yourself some of this, Amma, how can the good folks at home get themselves some of this?
Well, if you look right above my profile pic, you'll notice the @Amasugiru. I am @Amasugiru across Twitter, Instagram. I don't have a Facebook. I have a Ko-Fi, which is just a place where small donation collections. I'm working on a Patreon and a website as well. I've recently been picked up as part of a project working on D&D campaigns. So I'm doing some more work for them as well, and I'll have more information on that. And if you check the pinned tweet on my Twitter, I was taking commissions. I'm currently on pause because I've got a bit of a backlog, but I will be open again. And I'm looking really to expand upon bringing more art into archaeology and some of the stuff that I do as well too.
Very cool. Very
featured on Critical Role.
Many times.
Multiple times. So our next bit of programming on here will be next Tuesday. Will be episode 2 of our newest actual play role-playing game set in the Cyberpunk 2020 universe, CRM 2020. Watch the adventures as our game master Serra leads a group of misfits is way too generous as they are introduced to each other and then to a business proposal. And I won't go any further than that. You need to watch next Tuesday for that.
Yeah.
And then one little last bit of note. We are, acknowledging what's going on in the world right now with the COVID-19. And next week on Wednesday, there will be a special. Right now, everything's going to be sort of pending on that. In terms of like what channel to look for. So I would suggest looking onto the Archeo Thoughts Twitter page for the exact channel where that's going to be presented. It'll be myself and a panel of other archaeology communicators, other archaeology podcasters, as we discuss the impact that this is having on both the archaeologists, the archaeology community, and various other aspects of that. So that'll be next week. Like I said, follow Archeo Thoughts for that. So with that all said, we got all the plugs out of the way. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us at ArchaeoRPG on the old Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter machine, or at our email address, which is archaeorpg@gmail.com. If you wish to support our shows or any of our shows or all the shows, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/ArchaeoRPG. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. That's the 3 to help spread the word. Once again, thank you, and keep digging. Bye.